Carrie Lenoys had been a busy woman for the last few years. She had worked hard to make a good name in the business of making dresses for people. Most of her clients were wealthy and they used her shop to have their dresses taken in or altered and sometimes handmade. She was mostly known for her wonderful bridal gowns, and today she was going to be fitting one of LA's finest. The wedding was going to be the wedding of the year, and she had been honored when she had received the call from the famous Della Street asking her to make her wedding gown. Della was marrying her partner, the famous attorney Perry Mason, in August. Della had found a dress that she had liked and had brought it in for Carrie to see and let her know what she had wanted her wedding gown to look like. Della had good taste and had a nice figure. She was going to look very nice and exquisite in the gown that she had chosen. It had a long sequin train and was sleeveless with an empire design. There would be a ribbon around her waist that would be seen in the front but not from the back. She wanted the train to be detachable, as she only wanted to wear the train as she walked down the aisle. Carrie was glad to hear that there would not be many changes between what Della had seen in the magazine and what she wanted to have her gown look like. Della was a size 4 and was 5 feet 6 inches tall. Today Carrie was going to take some more measurements and make sure that everything was all right. Promptly at 2, as had been arranged, Della and her sister Lori showed up at the dress shop. Lori was younger than her sister and much more outspoken, but Carrie had liked both women the moment that she had met them. Della had chosen Carrie's bridal shop to make her dress because of the location and the reputation. Carrie was a very friendly lady in her early 40s who listened to everything Della had to say. She had never kept her waiting, and as she looked around the shop, she could see that it was a busy place. Carrie had asked Della for permission to display her gown, and Della had asked her not to until after the wedding. She would be more than willing to let Carrie put up pictures of her in the gown, but she did not want to take a chance that Perry might see it. She wanted him to be wowed by her when she walked up the aisle. Carrie had agreed to the terms and had been extremely helpful with the designing of her dress. This was to be her and Perry's wedding, and Della wanted everything to be perfect. As she went out back to put the gown on one more time, she smiled to herself. Della had never been a girl that the guys went after. She had been a quiet, studious student through high school and then college. When she had gotten the job at Perry's office, she had thought she was the luckiest woman on earth. Perry was kind, gentle, and generous. He had always treated her well, and their love for each other had been slow and steady. They were like two ships who had met quite by accident while way out at sea. Every day she grew to love her man more and more. As she walked out to be fitted, Carrie and Lori both applauded. "You look beautiful, Della. The dress is perfect for you, and you will be the bride of the year," Lori told her with a smile. It had been nice of Lori to come with her sister on this day. For at 10 that morning she and Della had been at Lori's bridal salon getting her last fitting before Lori and Mike's big day. They were getting married in 8 days. And time was getting real short for all of them. Tomorrow was Friday, and the finalization of the sale of Della's house to Lori and Mike would be happening. Perry would bring the information over to the registry of deeds, and the home would no longer be hers. She was going to miss her old home, but knew that she would be coming back. After all, her sister Lori was buying it. Lori and Della had always been close, and the two weddings being just 3.5 months apart had made them even closer. Lori was marrying a nice man named Mike Platt, who worked at the same computer company that she worked at. He had asked Perry to be his best man, and Della was to be the maid of honor, as Lori was going to be the matron of honor at her wedding. Mike was to be an usher, as Perry's brother Dave was going to be Perry's best man. Dave was going to be the type of best man who would be throwing Perry a big bachelor party. Perry had been planning the bachelor party for Mike for weeks. Della had not had time to find out much about it, but she had seen a bill for a few items come through the office. She knew whatever Perry was going to do for Mike it would be nice, so she let the men do their thing. They were allowing her and Lori to do their own thing after all. Carrie took a look at Della in the gown and loved how it was starting to look. Of course the dress was still in the early stages, but she was going to be a beautiful bride. Carrie was sure that Della would be in many newspapers and magazines and her dress would be seen all over the country. This one sale could make or break her and she knew it. For the next hour Carrie pinned and measured as Della stood there and turned when asked. Della had great poise and did not move at all. The fitting went well and Carrie told her that she would call her within the next month. The wedding was in August and she would have to make quick the work that she needed to do to make sure that the dress was ready in plenty of time for the wedding. Della and Lori headed back out to their house once more. They had both taken the much-needed day off to make the preparations for Lori's upcoming wedding. Perry thought that was what Della would be doing all day long and did not know that Della was at the dressmaker's herself. But meanwhile Perry had taken advantage of his time from Della. He had things that he needed to do to get ready for their wedding also. He had to make plans for their honeymoon. He and Della had discussed where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do, but it was up to him to make the plans. Della had told him that it was the groom's job to plan the honeymoon. He knew that she had enough to do without worrying about the honeymoon too. He pulled out the many brochures that he had picked up at a travel agency and began to look through them. He heard the knock on the back door and hoped that it was Paul. But, just in case it was Della and she had forgotten her key or something, he hastily picked up the brochures and put them in the drawer of his desk. But it was his friend Paul Drake. Paul took a seat and smiled at his friend. Perry took out the brochures and showed Paul what he had been looking at. There were several beautiful cruises and Della had said that she would like to go on a cruise to Hawaii. There was a 21-day cruise with many off-the-ship things to do. But the ship was getting booked and it would be leaving the day after the wedding. What do you think, Paul? We would have to leave by 9 in the morning the day after the wedding to get to the ship on time. Of course we could take a limo if we want, then neither one of us would have to worry about parking, he asked his friend. Paul looked at the brochure and the things that the cruise had to offer. It was 21 days long and stopped in Hawaii and basically stayed there for 4 days and then cruised all of the Hawaii Islands. It was beautiful and they had one more suite available for that trip. I would take this cruise. It has everything that Della and you want. And as you said, you can both take a limo and not worry about an airplane ride or worry about parking. It looks fine to me, Paul told him. All right, so it is the 21-day cruise. Perry picked up the phone and made the reservations. He also then called the same limo company that he would be using for the wedding and made a reservation for him and Della to be picked up at 9 a.m. in the morning the day after the wedding. What about the bachelor party? Is everything all set? Paul asked. Oh well, between you and me and Steve, I think everything will be all set. Mike thinks that this is just a regular Saturday night at the Masons Lodge. Steve is going to bring him all the guys from the lodge and your brother Dave will be there. Nearly all of the men who are coming to the party, including his brother-in-law Tom, will be there. The lady in the cake is taken care of and she will do a striptease for Mike also. To tell you the truth, I cannot wait, Paul told him. Well, the girls are taking Lori out for a girls' night. I think that they are going out to the nightclub that Lori and Mike are always going to. They will be out very late, I am sure, Perry told him with a smile. Well, everything looks all right from here. There should be no surprises and no one can get into the lodge before Going in front of Dan, and you know how he is. If you don't belong there, you don't get in. Hopefully, Mike will be genuinely surprised, although he must be expecting some kind of party soon. After all, the wedding is next Saturday. Paul told him with a smile. But at least for one more party you, my man, will be a bachelor, and as for me, I can pretend that I am single for a night. Paul told his friend with a devilish grin. It was now 5 o'clock and it was time for Perry to head back to his home. Paul also went home, and Perry then picked up his phone and called Della. He missed hearing her voice that day and was glad when she picked her cell phone up right away. "Hi. How was your day?" he asked her. "Tiring, but Lori and I finished most of everything that has to be done before next Saturday. Her wedding gown will be ready to be picked up on Tuesday. I have missed you, and Lori just left with Mike. If you would like, I would love some company," Della offered him. "I am on my way. We can go out and get something to eat," Perry told her. "Oh Perry, I have been going all day long. I would like it if you and I had a quiet evening together, if that is all right with you," Della asked. "Sounds good to me. It has been quite boring without you in the office. But on the other hand, Gertie is like a blast of air and always makes so much out of so little. Sometimes, I swear she makes me tired just watching her as she comes and goes," he said with a laugh. "Believe me, I know exactly what you mean. I'll see you in a few," and with that Della took out some steaks for Perry and her dinner. Della was glad to see Perry. It seemed silly to her, but she had missed him in just the few hours that they had been apart. But, when two people are together every day 8 hours a day, when you are apart, there is a void in your space. This was now especially true since they had told each other their true feelings and they were to be married in just a matter of a few months. Perry had stopped at the liquor store and had bought a bottle of wine for dinner. He had thought that Della would probably be making steak that night. When he walked in the door, he was greeted by Della, who put her arms around his neck and then she gave him a sweet kiss. He had returned the kiss passionately and then held her in his arms for a few moments. Perry sniffed the air and he had been right. "Oh, I smell the steaks and they smell wonderful. Here is a bottle of wine for the dinner. It is a good night to spend our time together." There was a baseball game that would start at 7. Just in time for them to have dinner and relax for the game. Perry would gladly help Della clean up the kitchen. After the meal, it was part of their equality in their future marriage. As Della and Perry sat down to eat, Della decided to approach a subject that neither one of them had ever discussed. It was the subject of birth control, or the lack of it. She wanted to have a child, and he had said that he too wanted to have children. But the question was when. She had looked into all kinds of different ways to prevent a pregnancy. But she would need to have a physical soon for some of the methods to be effective by their wedding day. "Perry, I need to know something about our marriage and how your and my plans are the same or different." She cleared her throat, as for the first time in a long time she was a little embarrassed to talk to Perry about something. "I want to know about when you want children. You see, if I need to be put on some kind of birth control, I should start looking into what kind is best for me soon. Some of the types take a couple of months to work." Perry looked at his steak that all of a sudden did not look as good to him as it had just a moment before. He also cleared his throat. Yes, he had thought about it, but Della was right, they needed to talk about the subject soon. After all, they were to be married in just 92 days. "I would like to have children as soon as possible. Perhaps," and with that he looked to Della. Della herself had thought about it also. She was a virgin. Oh, she knew that she was a rare commodity, but she had never had a need for any type of birth control. The only man she had ever considered sleeping with since she was an adult had been Perry, and they were waiting for their wedding day. Perry had made that clear to her and she was glad that she had saved herself for him. Perry was watching Della with interest. He did not know if she was a virgin or not, but of all the men in the world, he was. He had thought about having sex before, but had never gone all the way with a woman. Della looked at him and took both of his hands in hers. I love you and can hardly wait for our wedding day. But once we are married, I see no reason to stop any pregnancies that might happen, she told him. Perry smiled. He was the luckiest man in the world. I would be proud to be the father of any of your children and, like you just said, what will be will be. Whenever the child is conceived, he or she will know that they are loved of that. I am sure, he told her. In the meantime, Carrie had closed her dress shop and was getting ready to head out when there was a knock on the door. She looked out the glass of the window on the door and saw that it was her ex-husband. James had been an abusive drunk to both her and her two children, Lee and Bruce. She had divorced him 2 years ago and had a restraining order against him. But the police were slow to respond to domestic issues and had no sympathy for a victim of spousal abuse. I am calling the police right now. Leave my property, Carrie yelled at him. But he laughed and said, they aren't coming, you and I know that. The police think of you as a pain in the neck, and the last time you called them they threatened you with arrest. He was correct about that. James had broken into her shop and was threatening to beat her up, so she had told the police that she was being robbed, hoping that they would come quicker. When the police had arrived and they found that it was just a domestic assault, they had threatened to arrest her for calling in a false report. James kept banging on the door and yelling, and still no police. Finally, 10 minutes later, and after several calls, 2 police officers showed up and told James to move along. The restraining order that she had in her hand was ignored as long as he left the property right away. Carrie knew what that meant. It meant that he would be waiting for her at the house and she and her children would be in danger. Extreme danger, possibly. Carrie dialed her children right away and warned them to leave the house. They both knew where they should go and headed out to the school where there was a basketball game playing. There they knew that their father was no longer allowed to go and they would be safe. When things were safe at home, their mother would come and get them. Lee was the oldest and he was protective of his younger brother. He had seen what his father was capable of and knew that his mother was in danger. This day he was going to not let anything happen, so he made his brother stay at the gym while he went over to his house. He went there and waited for his father to come, but he did not show up. He saw his mom come home and watch out of the window for his father, but he did not come. After an hour his mother left and Lee called to her, letting her know that he had been watching for his father. Neither one of them had seen him, and now it was time for them to get Bruce, his younger brother. Carrie went home and fixed her 2 sons dinner. It was now 7 in the evening and she was a nervous wreck. Even thought her ex had not shown up, she never knew when he would. Like a fool she had stopped by his apartment to confront him, but he had not answered his door. That was normal for him, though. He would raise hell with his family and then go off and ignore them. It was one of those nights that she had gotten used to. James was supposed to be watching the baseball game that night with his friend Fred, but when Fred had knocked on his apartment door there had been no answer. He had gone back to his own apartment and settled for watching the game on his small screen television. He had looked forward to watching the game on James's brand new 42-inch television, but for some reason he did not come to the door. He had checked the door and the apartment door was locked. Meanwhile, Della had put a bag of popcorn in the microwave and then put it in a bowl. She and Perry took a seat on their favorite couch and settled down to watch the game. Della had never been much of a sports fan, but anytime she and Perry could be alone together doing anything was fine with her. She knew that the next day the both of them would be busy, Perry with the bachelor party and Della with Laurie's get-together. Della did not look forward to another day at a nightclub, but it was Laurie's time and she would be gracious. She knew that Perry felt the same way about the bachelor party, but he was the best man and it was his duty to throw a party for Mike. Della sat back and Perry put his arm around her shoulders. It was nice and quiet that night and she was looking forward to the night of peace and quiet. That is all the peace and quiet that a baseball game could bring. The game was long and Della had to get up a couple of times and stretch. She poured herself another glass of wine and leaned against Perry once again. When the game was over, Perry leaned over and gave Della a nice kiss. Finally it was time to get up and stretch and enjoy the spring air. The air was finally warming up and Della thought to herself that it was going to be nice for the wedding. She hoped that it would not be too hot for their wedding. The month of August could be very hot in LA. The rest of the evening went well and Della and Perry spent more time looking at homes. They had been discussing what kind of home that they were both looking for and the price range. They were looking for a home with a minimum of 3 bedrooms, a study, a dining room, a common room, and then a kitchen and a living room. They both needed a 3 to 4 car garage with ample parking for their 4 cars. Della wanted to have the laundry room on the first floor near the kitchen if possible and would like a large pantry. Perry wanted a study on the first floor and wanted it to be away from the noise of the rest of the house, and if it was possible he wanted many bookcases for his many law books. He would like to have a pool, but it needed to be fenced in because of the danger to the children they both wanted. The two of them both found a few houses that met what they wanted, and actually 2 of the homes had all of the things that they wanted. He would call the realtor in the morning and see when he and Della could go and see the homes. The realtor was sending him many homes online, and he wanted to get going on the purchase. As of Monday, the house that Della was living in was going to be Laurie and Mike's home, and they needed to find something soon. He could sell his penthouse and have the closing date at the beginning to the middle of August so that he could live at the penthouse as long as possible. If he and Della owned the home before then, he could move in and have Della wait to move in until they were married. He was a little nervous about that part of the deal, but he could live with it as long as Della could stay at the house with Laurie. "If the realtor is interested in showing us the house tomorrow, could you go?" he asked her. He knew that she had plans for the evening, but maybe they could do something earlier in the day, he thought. "Yes, I can do it, but I want to be back here by 3. I want to get ready for a night with the girls, and all of her bridesmaids are coming," Della told him with a light kiss on the cheek. Perry knew what she was saying even though she did not say it. The bridesmaids were a little loud, very loud actually, and the night would be very tiring for her. As for him, he was looking forward to some of the things that were going to happen the following night, but not all of them. He was sure that everyone was going to have a good time. He had made sure that there would be plenty of liquor and food. The stripper coming out of the cake was just part of the game. He told Della, "All right, I will call you as soon as I hear back from the realtor." Fred had been sitting there in his living room watching the game and had thought that there must be something strange going on. He had knocked on his friend James's door several times and had not gotten an answer. His car was in the yard, but the game was not on and he had not heard any sounds at all. Fred was well aware of the fact that James and Carrie were having problems, and when he had seen Carrie knocking on James's door he had been surprised. He had seen her leave, but had not seen her go inside. It was then that Fred decided to go back and knock on the door again. When he got no answer, he stopped at apartment 3E and knocked on the door of the management office. It was now 9 o'clock and he knew that the lady in apartment 3 did not want anyone coming to her unless it was an emergency after 9. He knocked. And Lisa answered the door. Fred told her that James would not answer the door and he was worried. Lisa looked at James and did not want to go to James's apartment, but she knew that he would come back again and again. If she did not go to James. James was a horrible man that thought that women were there just to serve a man. And never had a nice word to say to her. Lisa went over to his apartment and knocked. She also got no answer, so she used her pass key to get in. At first everything looked normal. But then she saw James's legs that were lying on the floor. Fred and Lisa went over to the body and saw that he had been hit over the head with something, and when Fred leaned over to check for a pulse, they found out that he was dead. Fred could not believe it. His friend was dead. He picked up his cell phone and called 911. The police were there within a few minutes, and Lisa let them into apartment 3C, James Lee Noyes' apartment. The paramedics arrived just before the police and verified that James had died. They called over the walkie-talkie that this was definitely a suspicious death, and the police came right in. The apartment was blocked off with yellow tape and the homicide branch of the police department were called in. That is when Fred and Lisa were introduced to LT Trag. The man was very thorough and took both their statements. Fred told him how he had seen James's ex-wife there. And as far as he knew, that was the only person that had been at James's apartment that evening, since he had gotten home from work. Carrie had been busy getting the boys' school work done and had just gotten dressed for bed when there was a knock on the door. She thought that it was going to be James and she did not want to answer it. But then she heard the knock again, and this time the knock was accompanied by a male voice announcing that it was the police. She peered around her kitchen curtain and saw that it was indeed the police who were knocking at her door at this ungodly hour. Lee had stepped out of his bedroom. The knocking on the door had been loud, and he had thought that his father had decided to once more come and bother them. He was as surprised as his mother was to see a police officer introducing himself as LT Trag knocking on the door. When LT Trag told them that he was from Homicide, Lee and his mother were shocked. As Carrie listened to the man, she knew that she needed to call an attorney. She answered as curtly but honestly as she could the man's questions. He had been told that she had been seen outside of her ex-husband's apartment shortly before he was murdered. James had been seen entering the building around 6 that evening and was not seen or heard from afterward. Did she talk to him? When I got there, he would not answer the door. It was common for him not to answer the door for her because he had been banging on my shop door earlier, she told him. Why would you not answer the door? He asked her. I have a restraining order against him and he was not supposed to be there. I called the police, but they would not arrest him and they just sent him home. Carrie told him. We will be in contact with you, was all they said. Carrie looked at her clock, and knowing that it was Friday, she might have to wait until Monday to call a lawyer. She thought about Della Street and the man she was marrying, Perry Mason. It was said that if you ever got into trouble, he was the man to have on your side. If the police came again over the weekend, she would call Della. She felt so sorry for her son Lee. His father had always been trouble, but no kid wants to hear that their father has been murdered. She put her arm around him and he cried in her arms like a baby. She thought about telling her younger son Bruce, but thought that she would wait until the morning to tell him about his father. Lori and Mike were out on the town having a good time. This was to be their last weekend of being single. Something told them that tomorrow night there was something going on. Perry had been quiet about what was happening, and Della had just said really to everything that Lori asked her. She was beginning to drive Lori crazy. Mike and Lori stayed out until everything closed and then came home. Lori was surprised to see no car in the driveway. She thought that Perry would still be there, but when she went into the house, she Could see that Della had gone to bed. That night Mike went home because he had promised Steve that he would help him with his car. He was having some problems with his car and sometimes it would not start. They both thought that something was loose under the hood and they would have to work on it in the morning. He felt that Della would like the privacy also. She was always a lady around him and sometimes he felt a little uncomfortable when he spent the night. But that would all stop come the next Saturday when Lori becomes his wife. The next morning Carrie got up to a phone call from her ex-mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law was very upset and wanted to know whether or not Carrie knew anything about what happened to her son. When Carrie told her she only knew what the police had told her, his mother became indignant. "You wanted him dead, I know that. Did you kill him?" And with that Carrie hung up the phone. That was when Bruce walked into the kitchen and asked her who was that on the phone. She looked at her son. He was now 13 and was growing into quite a young man. "Bruce, take a seat, I want to talk to you," she told him as he sat down at his chair at the table. "There was a terrible event that happened last night. I am afraid that your father died last night." Bruce looked up at his mother with tears in his eyes. "How did he die? What happened?" he asked her. "I am sorry, the police were here and they said that someone murdered him," she told him as tenderly as she could. It was several seconds before he answered her. "Murdered? Couldn't it have been an accident? What happened to him?" Bruce asked her. "They say that he was hit over the head by some object and that he died," she told him. Bruce looked as though his world had just crashed in. His mother got up from her seat and took him in her arms. She let him cry it out and then he told her he wanted to be alone for a while and went into his room. Della woke up early that morning. She looked out the window and was pleasantly surprised to see that Mike had not spent the night. Steve, Mike's roommate, was supposed to keep him busy that day fixing his car and then he would take him to the party. He still thought that it was just a meeting at the lodge. As for Lori, Jeannie and Gretchen were taking her to the mall to get some things for the reception and keep Lori busy until it was time for them to go out. Della was just sipping her coffee when Perry called. "The realtor just called and we could meet at one of the houses at 10. The other home would not be available until after 12. If that was all right with her." Della smiled. "Yes, that is fine." "What time will you come and get me?" she asked him. "Well, I am not yet dressed, but I could come over around 9 and we could fool around for a half an hour if you want," he told her with a laugh. "All right, but don't mess up my hair. I want to look good when I look at the house," Della told him with a laugh. True to his word, Perry showed up at Della's house at 9 that morning. He looked good. He was dressed a little casual, but you could tell by his clothes that he was a man of means and he had brought the town car, so her hair wouldn't get messed up. Della smiled as he walked into the living room. He walked over to her and gave her a good morning kiss. "Well, madam, this is a big day in our life. Perhaps we will buy a house for us and our children," he told her. "I hope that we find something that we like. I want to live in a nice house, but I want it to be a friendly neighborhood. Like this one where everyone knows each other. I don't want to live where you don't even know your next door neighbor," she told him. "That is what I want. I want my kids to have plenty of friends who feel comfortable to come over at any time. Don't worry, the house for us is out there someplace," he told her as he gently kissed her on the top of the head and took her hands in his. It was then that the two of them heard a noise, and when they turned they saw Lori standing there with a big smile on her face. "This is even early for you too. What's up?" she asked. "We are going to look at 2 houses today," Della told her with a smile. "I was going to tell you last night, but I fell asleep before you came home. Do you want some coffee?" she asked the two of them. "Della, it is already 9:20 and we are supposed to meet the realtor at 10. I have time for a quick cup of coffee, that's all. The house is about 20 minutes away and I would like to look at the house without anyone seeing me first, Perry told her. Coming right up, kind sir, she told him with a smile, and she poured the two of them some fresh coffee. It was just a few minutes past 9:30 when Perry and Della left her house. As Della drove by their office, she thought about how strange it was that they were not stopping by. Perry saw her and pulled her closer to him. As they pulled up to the street, Della noted the trees that lined the street and the children on the street playing. This part was something that she approved of, and as she looked up at Perry she saw that he too was smiling at the children. When they pulled up to the house, Della could not believe that this was the house that she and Perry were looking at. It was huge and there were two garages. One of the garages was full right now with a large boat. This was just what they needed, as they now had 4 cars. It had a long circular driveway that went right to the front door. The front door was double paneled and the glass went nearly from the top of the doors to the bottom. As they approached the front door, their realtor welcomed them in. The inside was even more magnificent. The ceiling to the foyer was at least 15 feet high with a chandelier hanging from it. There was a large closet to the left and a long wide hallway that ran beside the stairs leading to the second floor. To the left the French doors opened to a large living room. The living room was nearly as big as the entire house that Della now lived in. When you walked through the living room, there was a large study with bookcases that went all the way to the ceiling. There was a moving ladder in there so that you could go from shelf to shelf easily. The deep Persian rugs that were on the solid cherry floors gave the room a nice look. As they stepped out of the study, to the right was a large dining room that had a table with 10 chairs. There was even room for more and a buffet if they wished. Off of the dining room was a double sliding French door that went out to the patio. Della could see the large pool and backyard. The pool was completely fenced in with a see-through chain link fence. To the left was a tennis court and in between the two was a large pool house. The pool house could be used as a guest home also, as it had a bedroom and a living room and kitchen combination and 2 bathrooms. Della noted the large enclosed yard and the blossom trees that lined the fence. As they stepped back into the house, they went straight out of the door and entered a large family room. The family room looked off into the backyard and also had a deck with sliders going out into the yard. To the right was a large kitchen with a center island and a huge pantry to the left with a washer and dryer hookup. There was a full bath to the side. As you came around towards the foyer, there was a small half bath to the right. As they went upstairs, Della could not believe how that looked. To the right was a large bedroom with a huge closet, and between that room and the next was a bathroom with double sinks and a huge soaking bathtub. Straight ahead was the master bedroom. It was huge with a cathedral ceiling to walk in closets and a private bathroom with double sinks and a separate shower and bath. The toilet was actually enclosed. Then to the left was another room. This was smaller but very nice and could be used as a nursery. The third floor was an attic and could be expanded if they needed the space. Della was in tears. It was everything that she had ever dreamed of. She watched Perry for any signs of his thoughts and saw nothing. He could keep a straight serious face when he wanted, she thought. After they had gone through the entire house, Perry confirmed that the asking price was 1.8 million. And the realtor said yes. Are they willing to negotiate on the price? When will this house be ready for us to move into? He asked. The house will be ready for occupancy on July 1st. That is the closing date that they are asking for. They are building a new home in Malibu and the house is not quite ready, he told them. Thank you, and we will meet you at the next house at 1. Perry told him, and Della and Perry left for a quiet lunch together. It was already 11. It had taken a long time to go over the property. It was huge. As Della got into the car, she breathed a sigh of relief. The house had everything on their list and more. But Della was now worried that she wouldn't be able to keep up with such a large house. After all, it had 5 baths to take care of. Never mind the 4 bedrooms and the bonus room. It was beautiful, and then they would have a place for company to stay if they needed to. The pool house was small but very nice. She liked the neighborhood too. Perry smiled at Della and said, "Well, what do you think?" Della laughed. "OMG, it is beautiful, but it is an awful lot of house." When he said that we could add to it by building extra rooms in the attic, I thought I would die. How many children did he think we are going to have? That is the reason I love you, Della. It was nice though, and it has the pool, the huge pantry that you want, and a 5-car garage. We could live there for a very long time. The schools in the area are some of the best, and there were children right out on the street playing. Della just put herself closer to him and thought. The house was just 10 minutes from the office and only about a mile from Paul and Sue's. It was a nice neighborhood, but they needed to look at some other houses before we jump into the first one we see, she thought to herself. The lunch was good, but Della could not eat. She had the party tonight, and they had just looked at a house that would take anyone's breath away. It was the most beautiful home that she had ever seen. It was what she would have called a mansion. She wanted a home that was more like a nicer normal home, a little smaller, but she knew that Perry deserved the best. At 1 o'clock, Perry and Della came to the second house. This street was another home where there were lots of families, and each house had a manicured lawn. Della noted that most of the houses had landscape people doing their yard work. That was probably what they would need. The yard looked huge, and she knew that she and Perry would not have the time to keep their yard up. As Della and Perry pulled up, the first thing that they noticed was that this house had a 3-car garage. But when they looked inside, the bays were long enough so that you could park 2 cars inside each bay. So it actually was a 6-car garage. They walked into the home through the large breezeway that was between the garage and the house. As they entered the house, they walked directly into the large open kitchen. The kitchen was a gourmet kitchen with a large hood and a 6-burner gas stove. The refrigerator was large with 3 doors, and you looked right into the open dining room. The dining room was large and elegant with French doors that took you to the large backyard. The yard had a fenced-in pool that had an alarm on it if anyone tried to open the gate that did not have the combination. Della opened the door in the kitchen and was amazed once more by the large pantry with shelves and a place to plug some things into. There was a laundry right next to it, and past that was a full bathroom. The washer and dryer was off the kitchen, but the third door to the bathroom was off of the dining room. As they turned the corner around the dining area was a large family room. From the family room was another set of French doors going out to the huge backyard. As Della and Perry stepped out into the backyard, they were both pleased by what they saw. The gardens that were next to the fence gave off a fragrance that would fill the home later on in the season, they were sure of. The pool was large and was well fenced in. There was a smaller pool house than the other house, but it did have a living room kitchen bedroom combination with a large bath. It would be fine for someone to stay in while they were here on a visit. Della thought of her parents and Perry's brother Dave, who would be coming out. It was a nice shaded yard. They went into the home and turned right out of the family room. Straight ahead was a large study with lined bookcases. There was a large desk sitting in the middle of the room, and you just knew that this home belonged either to a lawyer or a judge. To the left of the study was the large formal living room. It was a very nice living room and looked to Della as though it would be a favorite place for her and Perry if they bought this house. As they walked out of the living room, they walked into the foyer. The foyer was large and high-ceilinged like the other house. The door was large and welcoming, and as Della opened the door and looked out, a neighbor waved to her. She waved back and smiled at Perry. That was when they went up the stairs to the bedrooms. There were 3 bedrooms on the second floor. The first 2 bedrooms were on either side of the stairway. Each room was large and had huge closets. Straight ahead was a bathroom with double sinks and a view of the backyard. To the left of the bathroom was the master bedroom. This bedroom was large, not as large as the other one, but plenty large. Enough for her and Perry. It measured 25 by 16 and had a large walk-in closet. But when she went into the bathroom, Della fell in love. It was marble and had a working gas fireplace. It had double sinks and a separate shower and bath. She peeked down at the large yard and nodded her approval. As Perry and Della went down to talk about the house, Perry asked the questions once more. "You said that the asking price for this house is $1 million, correct?" With that the realtor nodded. "When would this home be ready for occupancy?" Perry asked him. "This house will be ready in 3 weeks. The people have already moved to their new home, but as you can see, they still have a few things to take out of here and they are on vacation. They will be back on June 25th. I would think that they could do the signing after the 4th of July, the realtor told him. "Thank you, and of course you will continue sending us pictures of other houses, while we make our decisions?" Perry asked him. "I have 2 more houses that you could look at tomorrow if you are interested," he told them. Perry looked at Della. He knew that they needed to get going on this house buying thing, and with any luck he might be able to be home by 2 am tonight. "What do you think, Della?" he asked her with a smile. "I think that I would like to see a couple of more houses. But please make it in the afternoon. I have plans for this evening and I will be out rather late," she told the realtor. "That is fine. What if we meet at 2? Here is the address of one of the homes. They are both only about 10 minutes from your office," he told them. With that, Della and Perry headed back to Della's house so that they could get ready for their parties that evening. "Why don't you try to not think about the houses right now? Just relax and I will come over in the morning and we can talk about them then. I need to get going. I have to be at the lodge in 2 hours. Perry told her as he gave her a long lingering kiss that made neither one of them too separate. But he needed to go and they both knew it, so Della said goodbye to him. Meanwhile, Carrie Lenoise was not having a good day at all. Her ex-husband's murder was all over the news and that depressed her and the boys even more. She had not heard from the police since they had come that night. And she wondered what they were thinking. Perhaps they had an idea who the murderer was. She had gone to his house, that was true, but she had not been able to get in because the door had been locked. All of the apartments at James's house had doors that automatically locked once you were inside. You either needed a key or he would have to let you in. Lee had called his grandmother and straightened things out between the 2 women. She knew that the 2 of them had acted like children. James's mother knew that Carrie could not kill anyone and that someone else had done the crime. But who? James was not a nice man and he did have some enemies, but which one of them would dislike him so much that they would kill him, she wondered. Perry arrived at the lodge about an hour before Steve was supposed to be bringing Mike with him. Paul and Perry were getting things ready with other members of the club. They were expecting about 60 people to come that night and Perry had it catered so there was a lot of good food and drink for everyone to eat. There would be fun if he had his way, and with the help of Paul and Steve things looked good from his end. Sure enough, just as the 8 o'clock bell rang, Steve pulled up to the lodge and he and Mike got out. It was a good thing because the food was good and Perry wanted everyone to have some time before the stripper arrived at 9:30. Mike was very pleasantly surprised when he found out that the meeting was for him and his party. The food and the drinks flowed easily, and soon he was having a great time at his bachelor party. Jeannie and Gretchen came home with Lori about 6 and told her that they were going to take her out for a night on the town. One more last girls' night before you take the plunge. Gretchen laughed. Lori smiled and ran into her room to get ready. All 4 of her bridesmaids and Della were going to take her to her favorite nightclub and pay for everything, even the tips. So at 8 the 5 of them left together. Perry had left them the town car so that they could ride in comfort, and off they went to the nightclub. By now the bouncer at the door knew them all well, and as they went right in for just a moment, Della felt sorry for the people who were standing outside waiting to come in. Some would never be allowed in, and she knew it, but for tonight it was Lori's turn to shine. Della told the doorman that it was a goodbye to the single life for Lori, and he found them a table near the dance floor. Although they were near the dance floor, the smoke and the noise was still terrible, and it was all that Della could do to hear what the waiter was asking her. It was nice though, and they had not been seated for long when a young man came over and asked her for a dance. Della did not know what to say, but thought to herself, "Oh, what the heck, I'm still single and it's only a dance." With that he took her out to the dance floor and started to dance a dance that she did not know. She did her best to fake that she knew the dance, but she was sure that he knew that she did not. Lori laughed at her sister as Della tried to let her hair down a little, and was surprised when a young man asked her for a dance. She thought that if it was all right for Della to dance, it must be all right for her. For the next several hours all 5 of the young women danced many times, all with different partners. Even though Della had been asked to dance more than once by the same man, she had said no thank you. She felt that more than one dance would not be appropriate, so she had a good time with several different partners. Lori did the same thing as her sister, but the rest of her friends were all single, and they ended up sitting at the table with 3 new men that they had met that night. They were polite and laughed about Lori and Della getting ready to take the big plunge. "Not me. I am going to be single until I am 40, one of them had told them. The night was a big success, and the 5 of them left together when the nightclub closed. Perry, Mike, Steve, Paul and the rest of the party were having a good time at the bachelor party. The girl had indeed jumped out of the cake with nothing on but a very scantily clad outfit. She came over to Mike and gave him a big kiss and hug. She then danced sexually and tried to get him to join her. But it turned out that Mike was like Perry. It was fun to laugh and enjoy themselves being the watchers, but when it came to actually doing something, that was not what he wanted. He wanted Lori and could not wait until they got married just a week from today. The bachelor party ended at 3 that day, and by the time Perry and his friends cleaned the R up, it was nearly 4 in the morning. Perry went home and fell asleep in his clothes. He was too tired to get into his night clothes. When he woke up the next morning, he was a little disoriented and looked at his watch. It was 10 o'clock, and he was supposed to be going over to Della's house to talk about the houses that they had seen the day before. He leaned over and looked at his cell phone. No, she had not tried to call him, thank God, he thought to himself. He called Della and was surprised to find that Della had slept very late herself and was just getting out of the shower. I am sorry Della, the party went longer than I thought, and by the time we picked up the mess and I got home it was almost 5 in the morning. I am going to shower and I will be right over. What a waste of water that we need to take separate showers. Della told her with a laugh. OMG, what a thing to say, Miss Street, she scolded herself. Perry almost could not believe what she had said, but he said only for a short time now, my love. We will be able to do anything we want when we want, with few exceptions soon, he laughed. I will see you within the hour. Lori had not meant to overhear her sister on the phone and had almost dropped her coffee when she heard what she said. She turned quickly so that she would not be seen, but Della saw her and smiled. She didn't care if Lori heard what she said or not. It was almost noon before Perry arrived at Della's house. Della had made them some sandwiches and chips. He was a little tired and, to his shame, had just a little too much to drink the night before. He had always been proud of himself in the fact that he never drank heavily, but last night he had drank 1 or 2 drinks that were not needed. Dave and him had taken a cab home. Neither one of them belonged behind the wheel of a car, and he knew it. Sue had come and gotten Paul. Della looked at Perry and laughed to herself. She believed that he might have a slight headache. And how was the party last night? She smiled innocently. Too much celebration for this old man, Della. Those young studs can surely drink and party. They probably were up early this morning. I had to take a cab over to the club to get my car. Dave and I should not have been driving, he told her. You could have called me, you know, Della offered. No thank you. I was embarrassed by myself. It will not happen again, I promise you, he told her. You are human, you know, Della told him and gave him a big kiss. What do you think of the houses that we looked at yesterday? Perry asked her. I loved them both. But the second house was the one that I liked the best. It was smaller and felt much more like a home. It was right down the street from a school and the stores are within walking distance. Della offered him. I liked the second one better also. It was plenty big enough for us and the study was a little more to the side than at the other house. It also was not so large. You are right, we would not be able to find each other without yelling. I want it to be our home. The breezeway was a nice addition. We could use that year-round here in LA, he smiled. Lori came in and Della and Perry told her about the houses. Wow, they both sound wonderful, but the first house did seem like it would be a never-ending job to keep the house up. You would need to have at least 3 servants to run a place like that. The other house was a home and could easily be kept up with little help from the outside. Which is what I know the both of you want, Lori told them. Well, we are going out and looking at 2 more today. We would like to find a home soon, since we are probably going to want to make some changes to the home and we are going to need to buy some new furnishings also. We don't have enough furniture to fill even the second house, Della told her. I want to thank the both of you for the great night that Mike and I had last night. I was just talking to Mike and he told me about his bachelor party. I am now starting my last week as a single woman and he is starting his last week as a single man. I cannot wait for Saturday, she said as she walked back to her room. Della and Perry left the house at about 1:15 and headed to the first home that they were to look at on that day. As they pulled into the street they were met by a guard who would check everyone who came in and out of the neighborhood. That was hardly the homey feeling that they were looking for, but they headed towards the home that they were to look at. It was a large brick home with 3 floors and a large wraparound porch. As you walked into the porch you could see that the windows could be opened out to allow for the fresh air. When you walked into a small entryway with a place to hang up your coats. You then walked through another set of doors. There you were in a huge foyer with a living room to the right. It was beautiful. And to the left was the study. Straight ahead was the formal dining room. All the rooms were made of wood paneling, and although beautiful they were made of dark wood. To the left of the study was another hallway with a bench seat. To the left was a bathroom and a pantry, and then one of the largest kitchens that Della had ever seen. It was gorgeous with everything that they could ever need. It had a lot of counter space and a large stove. It even had a walk-in freezer. On the other side of the kitchen was a large family room that overlooked beautiful gardens that someone tended to every day. It looked to Della like the stairs were circular, and at the top of the stairs was a large landing with 2 bedrooms to the right, and in between was a shared bathroom. On the other side was the same thing. It was a beautiful home and had been decorated tastefully. But it had no pool, and there was a stone wall surrounding the home instead of a fence. Della knew that a child could easily get out, and the road was a little busy. Della and Perry had just gotten into their car when Della got a call. She checked her phone and was surprised to see that it was her dressmaker Carrie. Della did not want to answer her because she was with Perry, but she thought that she might be able to talk for a few moments to her. She said hello, and Carrie told her, "The police are here at my house and they have a warrant for my arrest. They have accused me of killing my ex-husband James Lenoys." Della took Perry's arm to stop him from backing out of the driveway. "Hold on just a moment, Carrie," she told her. She put the phone on mute and told Perry that the lady on the phone was a lady that she knew and that she was being arrested for the murder of her ex-husband. She needed a lawyer. Perry told her, "Don't worry, Della, we will go looking for a house on another day. Tell your friend not to say anything and that I am on my way to the police station." Della told her what he said and she thanked her like 100 times. After Della had hung up the phone, he asked her, "Could you please tell me the young lady's name?" and then he smiled. Della looked like she was in a panic. "What's wrong, Della?" he asked her. "I wanted to keep it a surprise. She is the lady that is making my wedding gown. Her name is Carrie Lenoys. And her husband is that man that they have had on the news about his murder. They think that she is the murderer, but I don't think she did anything. Would you please just talk to her?" she asked. Perry leaned over and gave her a kiss. "I will help her, and I won't even ask to see her work." When he saw the worried look on her face, he leaned over and gave her a kiss and whispered, "Don't worry, I will take care of her for you." Perry walked into the police station and said hello to the men and women there as he walked the familiar corridors to LT Tragg and smiled. "Hello, Tragg. I am here to meet with Carrie Lenoys," he told him with a smile. "Hello, Perry. She told us that you were on your way," and with that he led him into a dimly lit room with a lady sitting at a table. It looked as though she had been crying. "Hello, my name is Perry Mason," and with that he waved the officer out of the room. "I need to know your story. Why do the police think that you killed your ex-husband?" Perry asked her. "We have been at ends ever since our divorce. I have had a restraining order out on him for the last 2 years. And he ignores them. The night that he was murdered, he had come to my shop and was demanding that I give him some money. I called the police, but instead of arresting him they sent him on his way. I really thought that he was going to go back to my house, but I followed him and he went home. I sat outside in my car for about 5 minutes and then went upstairs and knocked on the door. I know that he was alive because I could hear him inside. He just would not open the door for me because I had just called the police on him. I went home and had my 2 sons go to a basketball game at the school where they would be safe from their abusive father. But he never came. I waited for over an hour and then started over to the school. My son Lee had been outside watching for his father, trying to protect me. I did not know that he had been out there until he told me. My two boys have been terrorized by their father their whole lives, she told him. Perry listened intently and asked her, did you see anyone coming or going from your husband's building when you were there? No. But a neighbor and a friend of James saw me. His name is Fred and he lives in apartment 3D just about right across from James. Carrie told him. All right, the police are going to question you. Don't say anything unless I tell you it is all right to answer their questions. Who is watching your two sons? My sons are 17 and 13. They are all right. Carrie told him. Well, I am afraid that you will be held in this jail until we can arrange bail for you until tomorrow. Is there a neighbor or anyone that we can call? He asked her. Yes, my mother lives just 2 blocks away. Carrie told him. All right, I will get you a phone and you can call her. Perry told her with a smile. Don't worry, I will find out who the murderer is. It was another long day at the jail and Perry called Della finally at 7. Della already knew that poor Carrie would